welcome back to the channel, guys. Today I'll be making a comparison between the RTX 4090, 5090, 9800X3D, 9950X3D and 32GB of RAM versus 64GB of RAM. Now, if you're someone with a 9800X3D and an RTX 4090 and 32GB of RAM, you've got an awesome system. You really don't need to do anything. But if you've got the itch and you're considering upgrading, you can really only go one way, and that is to the Ryzen 9 9950X3D, Nvidia RTX 5090, and to 64GB of RAM or more. Now, I've actually done that. Whether it was worth it or not, probably wasn't, but I'm an enthusiast and I like to do this as a hobby. So for me, it made sense. So the model of graphics cards I'll be using for this video is I was using the MSI RTX 4090 Supreme X. This is a pre-over factory overclocked model, so it comes out the box with an overclock bias and a silent bias. I'll be using the overclock settings for this video. For the RTX 5090, I'm using the Asus TUF OC edition, so again another factory overclocked card, which is going to be using the OC setting. So both cards will be run at stock, and I'm just going to compare the two systems in a few games, and I'll run a few synthetics as well so you guys can see the difference. But honestly, this is just more of a look at the general kind of leap you get. I do need to make a disclaimer. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position where when I do upgrade my hardware, I can hold on to everything. So my RTX 4090, this is data that was captured before I parted ways with it. So the drivers will be older than the 5090 driver, and some of the game versions will be updated. But again, being the games that I'm testing are pretty old, there definitely won't be any driver optimizations in any newer driver. But the game versions may differ. So if you do see that, that is the reason why. But apart from that, let's get into the benchmarks. One of the advantages of the 9950X3D is that it basically is the best of both worlds. 16 cores, 32 threads, more than enough for any type of productivity workload, plus it's intelligent enough to be able to switch off some of those cores and still game. So I'm going to start off by showing off how good it is when it comes to productivity, and obviously Cinebench is a good tool to measure that. So this is Cinebench R23. I've got core temp here as well, so you can see power draw, temperatures. Ignore the core clocks, for some reason it doesn't get this correct, but everything else is correct. So I'll start with Cinebench R23. This will always remain on top, so you'll be able to see what's going on. As you can see, I'm drawing 253 to 54 watt. So quite a lot of power, but as you can see, it's cutting through Cinebench R23 with ease, and the temperatures are not too bad. You can see I'm getting about 70 degrees. And I was able to score a multi-core score of 47,057. So that's really, really good. My Intel i9-49KS, I believe the best I was able to get was like 44,000 or something like that. So this is faster than that, that's for sure. So I'm going to do a single core test as well. This does take time, but I'll speed it up for the interest of time, of course. So the single core score has been complete, and I've got a score of 2,358, which is really, really good. Just to be able to have all of that multi-core power and still have a really healthy single core score is pretty impressive. Okay, moving on to Cinebench 2024. Same deal, multi-core test, single core test. So as you can see, the results are in 2676 for the multi-core score, which is pretty insane. I'm thinking of my 4900KS that was getting 2551, and now this is getting 2676. So that's a massive increase. Realistically, it's not easy to get over 100 points on Cinebench, so that's quite substantial. The next test is Geek Bench 6, just a popular multi-core and single-threaded test. It just runs a whole suite of, I'd say, Office productivity tasks and simulates all of these everyday tasks and then gives you a rating at the end. So I'm going to run that now. Okay guys, so the score is in. So I got 3599 on the single core, which is really good, and 24,768 for the multi, which is very impressive. I'm pretty happy with that. With my 9800X 3D, I was able to get 3,600 plus, but considering the multi-core score is considerably higher, I'm actually very content with that. So all in all, happy with that. Okay, so I'm gonna just do some games now, and then we can see exactly how the two CPUs perform against each other. So first up is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Old game now, but it still has a nice in-game benchmark. So playing at a resolution of 3840 by 2160, using DirectX 12, and I'm also using the highest preset, just makes it easier for you guys to replicate the results on your system. Playing at 120 Hz with no AMD Fidelity FX CAS, and I'm using SMAA. In terms of the graphics, as you can see, highest preset, and that's what comes with it. Using the CAN benchmark, and I'll be back with the results. You can see the RTX 4090 scoring 188 FPS, while the RTX 5090 takes things up to 246 FPS, so about a 58 FPS increase. And in percentage, that's around 30% of performance improvement. So that's kind of what you expect to see going from RTX 4090 to 5090, so not too bad. So next up is Horizon Zero Dawn, and so for the in-game settings I use for this benchmark. This is a CAN benchmark playing at a resolution of 3840 by 2160 at 120 Hz. Did not use any dynamic resolution scaling, no Nvidia Reflex low latency, no VSync, no upscaling or any frame generation. I use SMAA for anti-aliasing. In terms of graphics, I simply used a very high preset. This makes it easier for you guys to follow along if you want to run side by side. And that is pretty much it for the in-game settings. Let's come back with the results.
Would you like to buy something today? Come take a look. I'll give you a good price.
So looking at the RTX 4090 scoring 136 FPS, which is not too bad, and the RTX 5090 getting 166 FPS, so just about a 30 FPS bump, which works out to about 22%, so a little bit lower than the typical 30% you would expect going from RTX 4090 to 5090. But what I can see is an increase in minimum FPS, and it does look like there was a lot less frame spikes as well. So that could be due to 9950X 3D and possibly more RAM. Who knows? But let's move on to the next game. Next up is F124. Going through the in-game settings, I'm using a resolution of 3840 by 2160. No VSync, no frame rate cap, 120 Hz. And I'm also using anisotropic filtering at 16 times with TAA only. So no upscaling. The game does support all upscaling though if you're interested. No frame gen or dynamic scaling being used here. And in terms of the actual graphics preset, I'm using ultra high. That also contains like ray tracing as well. Now in terms of the benchmark, this is a CAN benchmark. I'll be doing Texas, clear and dry with the TV pod camera mode, and just going to run a benchmark and bring back the results. So looking at the results now, you can see that the RTX 4090 was able to average 103 FPS, which is not bad for native 4K with ray tracing. RTX 5090 on the other hand did score 141, so a nice 38 FPS bump. In percentage, that's around 36%. So a bit higher than the general 30% you usually see going from 4090 to 5090. This is a very GPU bound game, so I don't expect that the 9950X 3D or the increased RAM played a part in any of these increases. Moving on to Cyberpunk 2077 now, playing at a resolution of 3840 by 2160, no VSync or frame rate cap, and I'm using Nvidia Reflex Low Latency. In terms of graphics, you can see I'm using DLSS with the CNN model. I'm not using the transformer model because back when I captured my RTX 4090 data, the game didn't have that option, so I'm just making a bit of parity here. Quality DLSS at 0.25 sharpness with ray reconstruction enabled. No frame generation, high textures, which is the maximum. Opted to use Psycho ray tracing rather than path tracing in this one. I think it was a little bit too much for the 4090 back then. And using 90 field of view, no film grain, no chromatic aberration, and no vignette as well as no motion blur. Everything else though is completely maxed out. As well as the utilities, you can see I'm just using auto for the AMD simultaneous multi-threading option. over RTX 4090 scoring 74 FPS on average, and the RTX 5090 gaining an additional 24 FPS with a 98 FPS average score, which isn't too bad. 24 FPS in a game that's so demanding is definitely going to be welcome. And in percentage, that's about 32% of a bump. So yeah, again, maintaining that kind of 30% plus average you'd expect from a 4090 going to a 5090. And one of the best things to see as well is the minimum FPS on the 5090 is better than the average on the 4090, so definitely a superior experience. So next up is Blacksmith WuKong, and I just use the benchmark tool. So in terms of graphics settings, I'm using 3840 by 2160 for the resolution, no frame rate cap, no VSync or motion blur. And in terms of the graphics, I'm using DLSS at 67%, which works out to DLSS quality. And when it comes to frame generation, that's also off. Full ray tracing, I would have turned it on if I had the choice, but because I captured my RTX 4090 data with it off at the time, I have to replicate the same settings with my 5090, and everything else is at very high settings. So let's get in to the CAN benchmark and see what kind of score we get between the two cards. So the results were in. As you can see, the RTX 4090 scoring 82 FPS on average, whereas the RTX 5090 system scoring 98 FPS on average, so getting around a 16 FPS bump, which works out to about 19% of our uptick in performance, which is falling short of that 30% that you'd like to see between the 4090 and 5090 if you're going to invest that kind of money. Now that we've looked at performance, what is all of this going to cost you if you want to go from 4090 to 5090, from 9800X 3D to 9950X 3D, and from 32 gigabytes of RAM to 64 gigabytes of RAM? Now, if we start at the 4090, trying to find one of these new is not really easy, and even if you do find one, you'll find that the RTX 5090 hasn't done too much to devalue this product. You're looking at around 1950 to £2,000 in the UK, and the model I'm using for the 5090, you can get that for around 2500. So pretty expensive stuff. So you're looking at, let's round it up to an extra 500 to go from 4090 to 5090, depending on what model you want. Now, when it comes to the 9800X 3D, you can kind of get that right now for 400 quid, which is pretty nice. and it's definitely worth that. But if you want to go from a gaming beast to a jack of all trades, you can spend an extra 200 and get yourself a 9950X 3D, which is on sale at the moment at 600 quid. Now, I don't know what happened to DDR5. It's gone really expensive now, but if you want to get 2 sticks of 16 gigabyte giving you 32 gigabytes, you're looking at around £200. And if you want to double that to 2 sticks of 32, you're looking at £300, so an extra 100 quid there. So in total, it's going to cost you an extra 100 for the RAM. It's going to cost you an extra 200 for the CPU, and it's going to cost you an extra 500 for the for the graphics card. So you're looking at around £800 to upgrade your RAM, your graphics card, and your processor to basically get the best of both worlds, from going from a gaming beast to a workstation technically and gaming PC. For some people, if you didn't want to make 2 separate builds, it would definitely be worth it. It will save space. But at the same time, the 4090 9800X 3D is pretty capable. So you could just really just upgrade the CPU and leave it at that. Some applications will need a bit more than 32 gigabytes, but if someone that wants to be on the bleeding edge, you're going to get an extra bit of RAM with the 5090 as well. So that might help in certain productivity tasks as well. So it all depends on the individual. For me, it was worth it. I was happy to spend the extra money, and I'm very, very satisfied with this system. So that is pretty much it for me, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment sections below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.